Hello there, you're watching another edition of Face to Face here on TV1, and tonight we're joined by attorney Swasthika Arulingam, who will be talking to us about the lead up to the local government election and the people's struggle. A very good evening, Swasthika, and welcome to Face to Face.
Thank you for having me, Navit.
Let's start off now. The local government election is set to take place on the 6th of May, and it's more often than not now people in Sri Lanka have already faced two elections back to back. This will be the third time around. How important is the local government election, and why should the voters be very keen on going to the polling station and casting their vote?
I think the local government structure is the closest administrative governing structure in Sri Lanka to the people. So which means people have almost direct access to their elected representative. So that's why I always say local government elections is one of the most important elections when it comes to devolved democracy in Sri Lanka, devolved administration in Sri Lanka. So I think this is a very important election. But having said that, there seems to be an election fatigue. There was a presidential parliamentary election, and then within a short time there's a local council election. So I think people might feel a bit exhausted by election and election campaigns and so on. But having said that, I do believe local council is a very important aspect of our democracy.
Now, when you take the political landscape in Sri Lanka, we clearly saw that there was a clear change in terms of how the parties were placed within the past two elections. We saw that parties like the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna going backward, and parties that had only 3 seats like the National People's Power coming on top. So there was a change, a shift in the political landscape. What are we to expect from the local government election? Will it be that same wave that will continue to this election as well, or will the people think differently this time?
I think the same wave will continue to some extent. It's too early to say whether the NPP would gain the same kind of majority or the same kind of decisive majority it got in the parliamentary election. We see a lot of, when we do our election campaigns through the People's Struggle Alliance, we see a lot of disappointment with the NPP on the fact that they're not keeping any of their election promises. So I don't know whether that would translate to people actually choosing something radically different to what they chose in the parliamentary elections, particularly because the status quo parties have been discredited. And I think that is a good thing. The fact that Podujana Peramuna, the SJB, the UNP, the SLPP, the status quo parties have been discredited. And I think that's a really good thing, because that is a political cultural shift from the political status quo, the political elitism which existed in our country. But apart from that, I also see a lot of disappointment with people when it comes to the NPP, and that might actually change the voting patterns in this time's elections.
When you speak of the candidates who are contesting this election, what are your thoughts about the complete set of candidates that each party has put forward? Do you see that there are enough fresh faces, and do you see that there is enough opportunities being given to the youth and the women, especially because there is a quota involved? What are your thoughts on those?
So I think it's a really good thing that legislatively we have introduced quotas for women as well as youth, because otherwise the status quo political culture is old men largely who are I have nothing against older men, but they are the status quo, they are the majority, which is a problem. So the fact that the legislature decided to bring in quota for women as well as youth is a good thing. But in terms of the youth quota, there was I would say the election commission handled the situation quite badly in this time around, in the elections this time, where there was a issue with the birth certificates submitted on behalf of youth candidates in order to prove their age and so on. And because of certain stringent legal technical objections which the election commission took up, there was I would say the many petitions or the many applications were rejected, and then subsequently we had to go to the court, and the court had to resolve this issue. So still in some areas where people could not go to court, applications which were rejected, which were unable to reach court, those applications and those candidates are not contesting. So the legislative idea was to increase the number of youth candidates in this time's elections, but youth candidates actually became a problem in terms of applications being accepted in the 2025 local council election. So in terms of the legislative initiative, I think it's a good thing. But I think when it comes to the Election Commission has a duty to ensure that the legislative intention, which is to increase the participation of youth, is met, and not knock off application on technical grounds, which is what I think the Election Commission or the returning officers in the districts did this time. And that kind of proved to be counterproductive to what the legislature wanted.
Do you feel like the election law is flawed or is problematic, given that we saw that many nominations were rejected and there were cases pertaining to the rejection of nominations? What are your thoughts on that?
I think the Election Commission has a very important role. They are kind of like the guardians of electoral democracy in this country. So that role is a very serious role, and that role should not simply be, this person has not submitted this document, so I'm going to knock off this application. That should be something more than that. How many applications can we allow for them to go and contest and so on? How many parties can we allow to move forward in the electoral democracy or to contest in this time's election? So I think Election Commission should not, and the officers of the Election Commission should not just see their role as these are the technical issues and let's accept or reject applications by ticking a box. And that I don't think that should be the role of the Election Commission. And I think this time around, many returning officers, that's how they conducted themselves. So in that sense, I think this time's election it became quite a messy a scene on the ground because of so many applications being rejected. Having said that, the election laws itself, there are certain issues which prove that the election laws also favor a certain group of people who are for instance, who are financially more secure than, for instance, new candidates who are coming in. To give an example, this time, just before the local council, just after the local council election was announced, the Election Commission had a meeting with female political party members and potential candidates and so on. And one of the things which the females or the women asked from the Election Commission is that there is a provision in the election law which says that we can't go door-to-door campaigning, and that's illegal, and you can be penalized for it, you can be arrested for it. And the women were like, that is the only option we have. We don't have large amounts of money to do any other kind of campaign, to reach mainstream media. So the only campaign tool we have is to go door-to-door campaigning and reach our potential voters. So why is that made illegal in this country? Isn't that a very elite form of election law in this country? So that challenge to the Election Commission, in fact, I believe to the Parliament also, came from the women candidates, particularly those who are contesting for the first time. So I think there is things to be changed in the election laws, particularly on how election laws favor those who are financially more stable than perhaps new candidates and smaller parties and so on.
You have been active and on the ground with all of this. So I'd like to ask you now, say that someone is entering politics for the first time. Mostly this is the starting point of your political career.
Yes.
That is where you enter
Yes.
politics, the game of politics. How easy is it for a newcomer to come and contest at an election like this in Sri Lanka?
I think it's quite challenging, particularly if you don't have the financial and the organizational backing. It is more challenging if you are a woman or if you are a younger person. It's more challenging because the status quo parties are still, I would say, not in favor of female candidates contesting and so on. Things are changing, but the changes, we have a long way to go. So it is quite challenging for new people to come and contest. So given all these challenges, it was quite refreshing to see new faces contesting in this time's parliamentary election. But having said that, the fact that finances play a huge role in election has always been a challenge for new candidates, and particularly in terms of reaching to a certain segment of people who would potentially be their voters.
If we talk about the voter turnout, we even saw that even with regards to the presidential election and the parliamentary election, there is a big cost of the people who are working in Colombo and those areas to go back to their village. There is a bus fare involved, yes. You have to take leave, and it's not easy to just go and cast your vote and come back. And people have done that back to back twice. Do you think that the people would really incur that cost and go back to their village to cast their vote for this election as well?
So I'm glad you asked that question, because I'm also a unionist and I work with a lot of free trade zone workers. So we were just speaking to them in terms of elections and so on. And what they said is, this time around, we would consider not going to vote, because as you said, the cost, and then the fact that one day to go, one day to come back, the companies might not give us proper leaves, and then we might not have the bus to come back. So then one day extra leave, and then that would cost on our wages and so on. So they were saying perhaps many people would not, I mean, they were of course speaking in generalized terms, and they said perhaps many workers would not consider going back to their villages, back to their homes for the local council voting. So I think this issue of internal migration for work and the cost, the cost it takes to put a vote, that I think has always been an issue which has not been seriously considered by the parliament and even by people who are supposed to be conducting free and fair elections. And one of the long-standing campaigns in Sri Lanka has been that we have been asking for a similar structure to postal voting for even workers in the free trade zones who do not choose to go back to their villages and homes to vote because it's just too costly for them. But that has not been considered, or that has not been put into practice in Sri Lanka, which is quite a disappointing thing, because if the government sector, the employees in the government sector can vote through postal voting, I think that same right and privilege must be extended to any worker, any migrant worker who might not be able to go home and vote.
If we talk about, now since you also work with unions, trade unions as well, I'd like to ask you, what do you think are the main concerns of the public at this moment with regards to the political landscape? You said that the people don't really seem to be too happy with how the NPP is running the country. What do you think are the key areas that they should focus on?
I think food security, energy, transport, and of course housing. These are some of the key things which are impacting people, and particularly workers and migrant workers. The cost of living has not abated. It is still very high. And despite the fact that everything seems to be normal, we are not having petrol queues and fuel queues and so on, despite the fact that we are not having a visible representation of the crisis, 1/3 of Sri Lankans are in poverty. And those are not numbers which we should take lightly. The government should not take it lightly. And I'm not saying the NPP government can resolve this overnight. This is a 44-decade-long problem. But I wonder whether the policies and principles which the NPP government has been pushing forward, including the debt restructuring agreement which they entered into, including the EPF, the domestic debt restructuring which resulted in the EPF loss for workers, whether those policies which the NPP government is taking forward is going to result in the turning off these policies which have been impacting people as well as particularly workers for a very long time. So I think we were hoping, despite the fact that I contested in a different party and so on, the NPP did promise for an alternative debt analysis in their manifesto. They did promise a different kind of governance. They promised the abolition of the PTA. They promised better rights for the LGBTQI community. So these are things which they promised, and these are things which could have been done soon as they came to power.
Do you see those promises becoming a reality? Do you see them actively taking steps towards making those promises a reality?
So I can say for a fact that the debt sustainability, the debt restructuring agreement, they went ahead with the Ranil Wickremesinghe agreement. So that was a promise not kept already. In terms of the EPF theft, which continues to happen, when they were in the opposition, they opposed it because everyone knows that this is a crime financial crime which is being committed on workers, which is their only savings. And when the NPP was in the opposition, they opposed it. They went to court. They opposed this restructuring. Now they're in power. They do not want to reverse that debt restructuring which is happening. Similar to the PTA, they opposed the PTA when they were in the opposition. President comes to power, Anurakkumara Dissanayake becomes the president, he starts using the PTA, and members of the government starts justifying the use of the PTA under various pretexts and so on. So once again, I don't expect the NPP government to change what has been the culture of a country for the last 4 decades. That's not what I'm saying. But things they do and things they are saying is a sign that they do not plan to change. They hope to become a status quo party, or they have already become a status quo party. And I think that is worrying for a political culture, for the people who voted for them because they wanted a system change.
System change is a very I would say it's been overused in Sri Lanka, because from the start of the Aragalaya up to now we hear the word system change, system change. Has this system change really taken place, at least to a certain extent, ever since the governments have changed?
Under the NPP government, given what has been happening so far, I don't think a system change has been happening. As
people have changed when casting their vote. They have shifted the usual paradigm. But do you think the governments and the policymakers have really established this system change?
I completely agree with you. People placed a huge trust in a new party which has never been in power, and they voted decisively, gave a decisive mandate to this party. They have 2/3 power in parliament. They are invincible. When you speak of the powers and the governance, they are invincible, right? But given the fact that they have so much power in parliament, why haven't they passed very simple legislations which have been pending for so long? That is why I mentioned the whole issue of decriminalization of same-sex relationship. This is something which can be done with a simple majority in parliament, but this government did not move a bill in order to do that. And these are the worrying signs that this government the government wants to keep, kicking the can down the road. It's more of them surviving in power rather than actually pushing for certain changes which people wanted. So I absolutely agree with you when you said people have voted for a radical change, but I don't think the NPP is in a position to accept that mandate and act in confidence of that mandate, because if you are more worried about how long I'm going to stay in power, then you would think the status quo is the right way to go forward, because status quo is a comfortable space. Everyone is telling you to not move away from the status quo. The persons, the political and the business elite who are already in power, they would not allow you to move away from the status quo. So we were hoping that the NPP government, despite all of these structures, would move away from the status quo, but signs are that they're not going to do that.
When you speak about the key political parties in Sri Lanka, let's leave the NPP aside that now that they're in the government, but the others who were defeated at the previous elections, where do you see themselves positioning each other's parties for this upcoming election?
What is worrying is, I think the SLPP has been regrouping and reorganizing under Namal Rajapaksa, and that is very worrying, because SLPP, when it was in power, even when it was not SLPP, when it was in power, it was an ultra-nationalist, racist, far-right party with a few populist policies thrown in, but that is what it was. So it's very worrying that they are regrouping and they are coming back and they are defending themselves and they're erasing what has happened in the past. Issues like that are obviously worrying for our democracy, because people decisive said go home. They don't want the Rajapaksas anymore. They said go home. And today members of the SLPP is able to come to platforms and discredit the Aragalaya without any kind of shame. And they have the confidence to do that. And the fact that now they have regained that confidence to do that, which they did not have 2-3 years ago, is a worrying sign. And I think we should always watch for far-right parties, ultra-nationalist parties, nationalist parties who are trying to use the discontent of people and come back into that power fold which people push them. During the last election, they were pushed to the peripheries, but now they're trying to use that discontent to come to the center. So even though parties like my party, People's Struggle Alliance, we criticize the NPP harshly, one of the reasons why we do that is because we're also worried about these parties trying to use that discontent and come to the center.
Let's talk a little bit about the People's Struggle Alliance as well. How is the formation of the party this time for the local government election, and who are the candidates that are in the front line for this election?
So we are contesting in almost all districts as the People's Struggle Alliance, and we have fielded candidates in areas where we are contesting, and particularly we focused on candidates who have been working in that particular area, who have familiarity to the locality and to people, and whom the candidates whom the people are familiar with, which I think is very important in local council elections. The reception when we have meetings, when we have campaign meetings and so on, has been positive. People are listening to us. Whether that would convert to votes or not is something which we have to wait and see. But I think we also, because we are also a new party, this is the first local council election we are facing. So we are also learning a lot from meeting our older comrades as well as new friends we are meeting along the campaign trail.
Indeed, we have a lot more to talk about, but before that we'll cross over to a short commercial break. Stay with us. This is Face to Face on TV1.
ජනප්‍රිය ගායන හා වාදන ශිල්පී මාක් පීරිස් ගයනා ලුණු දෙහි ගීතයක් Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube ඇතුළු ඔබගේ ප්‍රියතම සංගීත සේවාවන් හරහා රසවිඳින්න.
Entertainments.
If you do not perform, or if you have not performed, and if you do not perform, this is a protest vote we are going to place, and that signal, that protest vote will go down very well, because the government will know that their popularity is coming down and they will have to arrest it.
This government needs checks and balances.
You can't say only winning parties announce their candidates. There have been it has been time and time again where, candidates are chosen.
Our police is still being restructured and reformed at the moment, and that is part of the reason. But I also think organized crime is a bit unsettled at the moment.
Face the Nation every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m.
ඔබේ ගමේ නගරේ දේශපාලනයේ හෙට දවස සතිය දිනවල සවස 6:30.
And people listen to us. And also because they don't like that wasteful, corrupt political culture. So the smoothest transition ever, I think any country could learn a lesson,
Just the fact that you're a woman is not sufficient. You need to have a good backbone. You need to be sure of who you are. And you need to have the strength to speak up.
After the Aragal era, we are led to believe that there are a lot of young people who are interested in politics, in governance, in system change and all of that.
Thousands of people who are involved. It's very polarizing. So we have to seek certain reconciliation also in the society when we talk about this. We shouldn't always be polarizing. We shouldn't always be, leveraging it politically.
Face to Face, Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m.
ජනප්‍රිය ගායන හා වාදන ශිල්පී මාක් පීරිස් ගයනා ලුණු දෙහි ගීතයක් Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube ඇතුළු ඔබගේ ප්‍රියතම සංගීත සේවාවන් හරහා රසවිඳින්න.
Entertainments.
Welcome back. You are watching Face to Face on TV1, and we are joined by attorney Swasthika Arulingam, who will be representing the People's Struggle Alliance. We see that the People's Struggle Alliance contested at the parliamentary election as well. What do you think went wrong for your party at that election, and what changes have you done this time around when you are facing the local government election?
So we had a self-reflection on what happened during the parliamentary elections. So there were 3 or 4 factors which we recognized. One is that there was a mass tide of support for the NPP, and the NPP has been campaigning for a long time. We started our campaign, I believe, far too late. So when a new political party emerges, people need time to get familiar with that political party and people in the political party and so on. So the political tide was towards the NPP, and of course they rode on that tide and got a decisive majority. In terms of the People's Struggle Alliance, we were a new party, so we did not secure many votes. And also we realized that when it comes to electoral politics, we also have to think about fundraising for campaigns and how we're going to do it, whether we're going to follow the same line as status quo parties or we're going to do it differently. And also organizational structure, how we're going to mobilize our resources, particularly when we are a small party starting off. So these are lessons which we learned during the parliamentary elections. It's still a struggle, I would say, for a small party, emerging party to contest even, and particularly within a short period, parliamentary election, presidential election, and then soon after 3-4 months later coming into local council election is a huge challenge for small parties, still I would say. But we are learning, we are a new party, and yes, we are hopeful.
You spoke about campaign financing, which seems to be a problem year on year with every election, because it's, I would say, one of the key factors that affect a successful campaign. Yes. Is the amount of finances you have behind it. For a local government election, do you think a new party, it's easy for a new party to enter and, fight the fight with those key players?
I think local council elections, it's easier than, for instance, parliamentary election for a new party to come, particularly a party which has a very strong base in a particular locality. I think it's relatively easier for that new party to secure certain, at least a few seats in the local council, than even perhaps a better chance than a status quo party and so on. In terms of campaign financing, and rather than saying campaign financing, election financing, I think it's a very tricky question. So on the one hand, how much gets spent and how much the asset declaration and so on. So that's on the one side. But how does our policies get affected depending on who is financing our campaign? This is a question which has been asked not only in Sri Lanka but across the world. Who is financing democracy? So that is something which we are very, very cautious on, who we are asking money from. So when we start getting critical on that question, then there are also challenges in terms of who we go and ask for money and how much money we get, and then how is that going to impact our elections. But that is the path and the route we want to take, because we came on a manifesto when we entered the presidential election. We first issued a manifesto before we even announced our candidate. So the policies and the principles we stand on is very important, and the path we take to achieve that is secondary. So the policies and principles cannot be compromised in the path we are taking to achieve it. So even in terms of election financing, we are very cautious on how we are doing fundraising, who we are asking money from, and so on.
If you look at the campaign mechanisms that are being used right now, we see, like you said, door-to-door used to be one of the options, but right now social media seems to be the key player, because we see almost each and every party, each and every candidate is running a huge, massive social media campaign. But there is no way that you can really monitor these social media campaigns. What are your thoughts on that? Why hasn't Sri Lanka really implemented any form of monitoring for these social media election campaigns?
You're right. Sri Lanka, in terms of social media and online or the virtual world, I think, Sri Lanka is yet to have a mechanism to, not only in terms of elections, but let's say online harassment and so on. We still haven't developed a mechanism where weaker sections of society can get protection, can get redressal. And when we are speaking about that, what the previous government went and did, and this government seems to be continuing with that, is that they passed an online safety act, which resulted in basically silencing dissent rather than protecting women and children who are getting affected. So yes, social media has to be monitored, particularly in times of elections and so on, but I would tread on that very cautiously, particularly with governments like not only the previous government but also the current government, which tends to use these very valid concerns about social media, about boosting, about money, where the money is coming from, who is boosting what and so on, tend to use all those valid concerns to later on silence dissent. So I think it's a very careful area to tread on, but I do agree with you that we don't have enough structures and perhaps enough expertise in place to put a check on what happens on social media, particularly in times of elections. And because you asked that, it's also about protecting, for instance, women candidates who go
we
through.
See even on social media right now, even with the previous the parliamentary election, we saw that there was up to a certain extent a big level of online harassment for some of the female candidates who even got selected to the parliament, because post-election we saw that there were many misinformation posts and videos being shared, and there was a big harassment happening for targeting specific individuals. So there was really no mechanism to put a stop to those. There was no way to monitor those. So those are big issues that need to be solved as well.
That is also one of the challenges women face when they come to contest, that now it's not only physical harassment which they go through, but in addition to that they also face reputational damage, online harassment and so on. This is one of the biggest concerns which female candidates have when they enter electoral politics. So that is something which has to be monitored, but I think we don't have the expertise and the political will. It's both, right? It's expertise as well as the political will to handle these issues. For instance, if I was a woman, if I made a complaint to the CID that a picture of mine is being circulated, I would not hear back from the CID. So what is the safety and security I have in terms of my safety and security, in terms of the state? So these are serious concerns we have. Particularly this gets even more louder when it comes to elections and when it comes to public spaces.
How do you think this time around the voters should cast their vote? Because like you said, the previous two elections, the NPP had a wave that they very clearly rode on, and they had a landslide win. But sometimes with the local government election, people's mindset is such that you have to vote for your neighbor, you have to vote for the guy in the village who always does the road, or who is always the one who is organizing the events in that locality. Do you think the people this time around will also go with the traditional mindset, or will they think differently like they did for the past two elections?
I think local council is precisely that. Who was with you in times of trouble? And if that person is contesting and that person has been with you all along, I would say vote for that person, because ultimately it's not any status quo party which would look into your roads, which would look into mosquito issue, which will look into drainage, which would fight for you. Because the status quo party or a party which is not in your locality doesn't care about your little roads, or doesn't care about mosquitoes, or doesn't care about drainage problems. It is the person who is living in your area who gets affected by this day in and day out who would actually fight for those things. So in local council election, unless of course there is an extraordinary candidate who comes and you think that person is going to listen to you, I would say vote for the person who has been with you all along in your struggles and so on. So that is precisely what local council elections is about. Who will look after the local interest of that particular person, and that does not necessarily have to be a status quo party. In terms of voting for the NPP for the local council election, the NPP has the presidency, the NPP has the parliament. If the NPP also gets a resounding mandate in the local council, the country can shift towards authoritarianism, which signs of that we're already seeing. So of course the people would decide as they have done in the past. But if the NPP does get a resounding mandate in the local council, for me that's worrying for a democracy.
How is the people's struggle movement hoping to face the election? What are the key, I would say, key goals that you all have set for yourselves? What are the promises that you hope to deliver to the people?
So one of the things, this is what I said before, so one of the things we did was we did select people from that locality. So they are the most knowledgeable in terms of issues. And these issues does not have to be, for instance, they don't have to be an expert on the laws or the debt restructuring or anything. These are people who have been with their community, who have fought for their community, dealt with day-to-day issues and so on. So they are the ones who are leading campaigns in that particular local body or that particular area, electoral area. So these are the candidates which we have chosen. It is not only a strategic reason to win votes. It's not that. It's just that we thought local council has to be led by people who know their locality. It can't be someone who is parachuted from outside. It can't be me going and contesting in Kandy without knowing any issues in an area in Kandy, without knowing any issues in that area. So that is something which we focused on in picking candidates. We are getting a good reception, but we have to wait and see whether that would translate to votes.
Indeed. I would also like to ask you, what is your final message to the people who will be going to the polling stations to cast their vote on the 6th of May?
I want to there has been a few suggestions by members of the ruling party that money will not be allocated, or questionable whether the money would be allocated to a particular local council if the NPP doesn't come to powers. There has been a debate on this going back and forth. The president has denied it, or the presidential media has denied it, and so on. But I just want to tell people that the money which the government is supposed to allocate to local council, irrespective of whether the ruling party comes to power or not, is not their money. It is your money. It is our taxpayer money, which the government and the local council body is supposed to use for our benefit. So vote for someone who would not use that political authority to gain his or her political mileage for future political elections, but who would use that political power and that political office to work for the people of that area. For a long time we have seen that lacking, but there has been certain local councils and certain candidates who won local elections who have really worked for their people. So the people know that, people know who they are. So I would say vote for them. Don't vote according to party. Vote for people who have stood with you on the ground when you most needed them in times of trouble. I think that is how people should think when they vote for the local council elections.
And who do you think will have the bigger portion of votes this time around? Because you've been in the ground and you've seen and heard people and you've heard what they had to say. Who do you think will have a landslide victory this time, or will it be a close fight, or will another new party come and take over everything? What is your prediction like?
I think as of now, what we have been hearing now, people are very confused who to vote for. That is my observation on the ground. People are very confused. People are becoming concerned about how the NPP is running the country.
Because what we heard was that with the previous two elections, one of the thoughts of the general public was that, since we voted all the other parties and they never delivered their promises, let's try the NPP this time because they've never been in power. But now they have also been given power, and if they have also failed to deliver the promises, then what will the people do?
As you said, I think people are at this point, it can change by May 6th. At this point, people are very confused. Some people are not even planning to vote. So that is very concerning, the fact that people are not even thinking of exercising the democracy. So irrespective of whether people are going to vote for the People's Struggle Alliance or not, we have been encouraging people to go to the polling booth and cast their vote, because that is a right, that is an right which is so fundamental to our democracy. But who will win is a question which we can only, the answer to that we can only see on May 6th or the next day or so on. Because right now I think people are very confused. People are also demoralized by some of the things which the NPP has been doing. And I think that should be a warning for the NPP, because people have really placed their trust on the NPP government when they gave that 2/3 majority. And if the NPP government does not meet that expectation, I think it is quite dangerous for electoral democracy in the future years.
Of course. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Swasthika Arulingam. It was indeed an insightful conversation, and that was your message to make sure you go to the polling station on the 6th of May and cast your vote and exercise your franchise, as it is one of your fundamental rights. Thank you once again for joining us tonight on Face to Face, and we wish your party all the very best to face the upcoming election as well.
Thank you so much.
And that's it for tonight from Face to Face. We'll see you again tomorrow at the very same time. Till then, take care.